Hello and welcome to the Unnamed Automotive Podcast. My name is Sammy Haj Assad, and with me, as always, is my good friend and fellow automotive journalist, Benjamin Hunting. Say hi to the people, Ben.
Greetings, human listeners, and welcome back to everyone from our extended summer break. We've never done that before, and we tried having past episodes, the Star Car Face-Offs and the cool interview about Nissan Desert Trucks, to kind of fill in the blanks. And if you are still sticking with us, thank you for doing that. This is our live episode coming back from the vacation, specifically Sammy's vacation and my vacation. Sammy, where were you again? Where'd you go?
I was out in the Middle East. I was in Jordan, and I had a good time with visiting some extended family.
Okay.
And parading my newborn around.
Wow. And I went to Maine. I went to an island off the coast of another island in Maine. You have to take a mailboat to get there. It was nice and isolated, and that's what I wanted and needed. But now we're back. We're actually, Sammy, I know normally in the introduction to the podcast, you like to talk about who we are and who we write for. Do you still want to do that?
No, we've got the gist of it. There's this guy who came back from vacation and another guy who came back from vacation. What else do you want to know when you're starting up a podcast?
That's right.
But what I want to say is, I really appreciate the feedback that we got from the people who were listening to our replayed episodes, which were some Star Car face-offs. I got a text message from one of our listeners, Alex, who says he's a Star Car face-off fanatic. So I really appreciate that. I'm glad that there's people out there who actually enjoy the
I think
weird
more people listen to them this time than when they were originally broadcast.
That's true. I mean, it was a different time. We were a small unnamed automotive podcast then, and now we have a bunch of listeners who demand content.
Hollywood related content.
We're here with the content to give.
Yeah,
right?
And speaking of what we're talking about this week, it is related to the Middle East in a way, because the vehicle that I drove while Sammy was gallivanting on another continent is a perennial bestseller in the Middle East. Was it not, Sammy?
Yeah, I think so. Alongside some other full-size SUV or body-on-frame SUVs, but the car that you're talking about has returned to North America. At least the nameplate has.
Yeah,
right?
It's returned. It's different. It's trying something new, but in a lot of ways, it's falling back on old habits. I'm talking about the 2024 Toyota Land Cruiser.
Now hold on.
Okay.
I want to know, longtime listeners of our podcast, and there are a bunch of them, will probably know that I'm a huge Land Cruiser fan. I love old Land Cruisers like FJ40s, FJ60s. I love the FJ Cruiser when it happened, and I even liked the last generation Land Cruiser, which was really just an unfancy Lexus LX, and eventually got killed, I think, by the Lexus LX because it was fairly expensive in the Toyota showroom.
It was for people who wanted to spend $80,000 for zero brand recognition. That's
not true. I think Land Cruiser had brand recognition going way back.
But the Toyota badge doesn't have it. So when you're spending that kind of money, it's hard to justify it when you could look across the showroom and see the LX and be like, well, everyone knows what a Lexus is.
No, I think that I've always said that the in my heart, the Land Cruiser is the Japanese Wrangler and Defender. It's like a brand on its own.
I think it was once that. But if you look at the sales statistics of its last 10 years of existence, I mean...
Yeah, that's no longer the case. The 4Runner is a brand on its own now.
It really took that over. It is a few thousand people a year were buying Land Cruisers, and they weren't even for sale in Canada officially. You could buy them. You could go into a Toyota dealership and say, I want this, but you would not find one in inventory. They weren't listed as being able to order on a website or anything like that. That's how small the market... I think they were selling about 100 a year.
Yeah, that's nothing.
So flash forward.
Yeah. Okay,
well, I was going to say, flash forward to today. I was excited to drive the Land Cruiser because, I mean, I'm getting a little tired of all of the off-road oriented stuff that's being crammed down our throats. It seems to be...
Hold on. There's a difference in off-road oriented stuff being crammed down our throats and actual off-road oriented stuff.
Well, you might, if you let me finish my sentence, you might have discovered.
No, I don't want to finish any sentences on this week's episode.
So I'm tired of that. I'm getting a little tired of that kind of stuff. It's mostly special editions and more knobby tires and more expensive things to buy. And it's really taken over almost all truck and SUV stuff. And as we've talked about many times, it's leaked down into the soft road world where, you have Mazda and Subaru are getting in on that action now too. and Honda and Toyota with the TRD versions and what's the Honda one called, Sammy? Something Pro? Am I wrong? I can't remember.
Pro Sport? No. Trail Sport.
Trail Sport. That's it. Yeah, I don't know where I got Pro from. So into this steps the Land Cruiser, which should be an automatic win. This should be a vehicle that is not a pretender, has like Sammy said, even though the badge recognition for among luxury fans at a high price is low for Toyota, the heritage of the Land Cruiser name is through the roof. Everyone pretty much knows what this means or has meant in the past. Toyota took a different approach to the Land Cruiser in terms of how it's being presented with this redesign. We were just discussing how the previous version of the truck was really expensive. It was a 3-row, big boned kind of thing with a V8 engine. The new Land Cruiser is similar in size. It's not actually that much smaller. We're talking a couple of inches here and there, tucking and nipping. But
okay.
It's a 2-row vehicle. It doesn't make any attempt to stuff people in the back. It is a hybrid. It has a turbo 4-cylinder. And it is, instead of being aimed at something like its, in-house competition, the LX, it's roughly what you would consider a 4-door Bronco or a 4-door Wrangler to be in terms of footprint and, I guess, mission statement.
Okay, yeah.
Except one important difference, stylistically, the top does not come off.
Okay,
and
right.
Historically, in North America, that's been how it is for the Land Cruiser. Not a lot of... The FJ40 was sold here with a removable top, but the larger 4-door models, I don't believe, ever had that feature.
No, I don't think so either. So in discussion of all of that, it's also worth pointing out that this rides on a platform, a truck platform, right? Like
it's a body on frame.
Yeah.
But unlike the Wrangler, it is not a solid front axle. And
okay.
If we want to talk about the platform, if we want to start off with that, I want to point out that this is by far a more comfortable vehicle than either the Bronco or the Wrangler when you're driving on the pavement. Like 90% of these will be driven. It is outstanding just in terms of handling. There's no comparison with either of those vehicles. Its primary rivals. It is way quieter too. You don't have, because it has the fixed roof, you don't have the intense amounts of road noise. And because it has very modest tires, you don't get the same kind of tire on asphalt buzzing sound that you're going to get from a more hardcore set of off-road rubber. So in that sense, the Land Cruiser is a definite win. And moving from the chassis and the comfort that comes with it, the drivetrain is great. Sammy, we've driven this in a bunch of other vehicles, right? The 2.4 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder with the electric motor that is in a bunch of Toyotas now.
Like I swear is it the same output as the Grand Highlander?
It's the Hybrid Max. I think so.
Max.
326 horses and 465 pound-feet of torque. Those are really good numbers. That's enough to push you ahead, I believe, of all of the Jeeps, except for the V8, which is, a hot rod, not really in the same conversation. I don't know if it's roughly equivalent to the EcoBoost version. There's a 6-cylinder EcoBoost version of the Bronco that I believe pushes past this. There's also obviously the Bronco R, but it's still quite competitive with a Bronco. With the pedal down, it feels good. This is a relatively heavy vehicle. I think it's 4,500 pounds, which isn't insane, but it's not super light, but it felt like a good amount of power. The fuel mileage is not amazing. There's a reason for that. It's full-time 4-wheel drive, Sammy.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
I expect a full-time all-wheel drive. Is there a disconnect, a 2-wheel drive mode, something like that?
Not at all. Is it
built on
all the time, but it does have a low range that you can access. So in that way, it's also different from the Bronco and the Wrangler, neither of which offer full-time 4-wheel drive at this time, I don't think.
Interesting. Is it it's not a slip and grip kind of all-wheel drive?
No, it's not. It's got 3 differentials. It's the real. No, sorry. It's got 2 differentials.
Okay.
Locking differentials.
That's fine.
The front differential doesn't lock. There's some weird stuff about it though.
Sorry, okay, go ahead.
It has you can
sometimes you glance over something that catches me off guard.
Well, the front differential locks in a G-Class, so I thought I would mention it here that it doesn't.
I think it locks in the Bronco too.
The front differential?
Front axle.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't remember. In any case, you can lock the rear differential in the Land Cruiser, but only when it's in 4 low. Mm-hmm. And I believe only once the center differential has also been locked.
Okay.
Does that seem weird to you?
Yeah, a little bit.
Because the thing about a locking rear differential on most other 4-wheel drive vehicles, or even 2-wheel drive vehicles, is that it's useful for situations where you don't necessarily need low range 4-wheel drive. Like, let's say you're trying to pull out of a parking spot or you're backing down a boat ramp.
Yeah, you don't want to be in 4 low for that.
Yeah, you don't need to be, right? You just need that extra so that was something strange about the drivetrain that kind of caught me off guard. But Sammy, I've been saying a lot of good things about the Toyota Land Cruiser to this point, right? Like I like I like how it drives. I find it has a good the power is good. Those are pretty much the only good things I have to say about it.
Come on now.
No, don't
do this.
This is a fundamentally flawed vehicle, and it's because of how the product planning was done, not because of how it was executed. Where should we start?
I mean, start at the top. What's hitting you with this vehicle that's making it feel so, unworthy?
Let's start with the price.
I think that's a very good place to start.
In the United States, this is a $56,000 vehicle. In Canada, it starts at $72,000.
$56,000?
Sammy, I'm not done yet.
That's finished. You've killed it. They've killed it.
There are 2 other versions that you can order. So I drove the base 1958, which I appreciate because Toyota is very good at putting base model vehicles in its press fleets. And that's something that other car companies don't do. And I'm glad that Toyota does it because it's nice to drive vehicles that people are actually ordering. There's a mid-level trim, which is just called Land Cruiser. That's $62,000 US, or in Canada, let me look here, $80,000 Canadian.
I need to talk about.
No,
this says something. This says something about what they think the Land Cruiser is.
We'll get there. The first edition is the most expensive Land Cruiser. In the US, it is $75,000. In Canada, it is $92,000.
That's insane. Okay.
So,
remember how the Lexus LX killed the Land Cruiser?
Yeah. Why is it insane, Sammy? How much does a base 4-door Wrangler cost?
A base 4-door Wrangler you can get for under $40,000. So we're talking at least $15,000 difference.
And I believe the base Bronco is also under $40,000 for a 4-door.
I'm just double checking here. It's called the Big Bend, which is a great way to name anything.
Big Ben or Big Bend?
Big Bend.
Do, 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 do.
39,000 4-door. Here we go. $40,000.
So again, another $15,000 difference.
Okay. This is not right.
That is wild.
$15,000. What is $15,000? What are you getting for $15,000?
You're not getting anything. And
you have to be getting something. No, you're getting a hybrid powertrain.
This is where that's great, but this is where the Land Cruiser starts to fall apart because if there was a $15,000 difference that could be explained by better equipment or some kind of really super cool retro styling or some a drivetrain that goes above and beyond, then maybe I would be a little more amenable to this pricing. But the reality is the Land Cruiser is boring to look at. It's fine. I don't have a problem with it, but it looks anonymous. It doesn't really do much to suggest the past. If you look at it in profile, it could be any of the many different rugged, square-looking off-roaders that we have these days. It could be like a Defender. It could even be, I don't know, something from Hyundai. We're getting these kind of squared-off SUVs. It's not all that different.
I wanted to talk to you about, you said the Defender. The Defender is $60,000, right?
Yeah.
That's a vehicle that has technology and luxury and performance to make it stand out, right?
Yeah, and if you want to get crazier, the Lexus GX, which is the same platform as the Land Cruiser, but has more power, has a 6-cylinder engine, it starts at $65,000. So you can, for the price of a mid-tier Land Cruiser, you could be in the Lexus GX. And if you wanted to spend more on a Bronco or a Wrangler, you can't really do that unless you get the Rubicon 392 with the crazy 6.4 liter V8, or the Raptor.
Yeah.
You know,
the Bronco R.
Even if you bought a wild track Bronco or the regular Rubicon, those top out at 62,000. Sorry, 60,000. So you are still cheaper.
Huge cry from the $75,000 first edition.
And it's less than a mid-tier Land Cruiser. So, getting
What's
back
happening? What are we getting? You haven't answered. What are we getting?
You're not getting anything.
How can it be possible?
The second worst part of the Land Cruiser, aside from its price, is the interior. It is just black plastic everywhere. There is nothing about it that is special. The armrest is the least comfortable armrest I've had in years. Like, my arm was hurting using it, and that's because just black plastic. And not only that, the base model Land Cruiser is missing features like multi-terrain select. I think that's what it's called from Toyota, like different drive modes for off-road stuff. Mm-hmm. It's missing, I believe it has a second gear lockout, first gear lockout, so you start in second gear. But there's some other off-road gear that you only get with the mid-tier one that's just not available here. You also get cloth seats. Now, I don't have a problem with cloth seats, but in an off-road vehicle, you want something that's easy to clean. Mm-hmm. And cloth seats are not easy to clean, man. I mean, Jeep and Ford understand that. And they're at least offering like a leatherette or a vinyl kind of option that you can just hose down. Everything about the the Land Cruiser, it just doesn't make sense. You're spending so much money to get what is essentially a very, very entry-level product. And the interior, like, space-wise, it's good. There's enough room in the second row. I folded down the rear seat, and I bought some garage shelving, like 5 shelves that I had to disassemble and put in the back of the Land Cruiser, and it did it fine. It swallowed them all. There's enough space. The load floor is a little high because of the battery in the back.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was fine. But like the details of the vehicle, they're just not there. You know, it is astounding how poorly marketed this vehicle is. It's like they decided to make a completely different Land Cruiser, but to make all of the same pricing mistakes that doomed the old Land Cruiser. And I can't understand why. Sammy, there's one more competitor for this vehicle that we have not talked about that is going to cause even more problems for Toyota.
Like what? Who?
You can't guess? What is another off-road vehicle for Toyota that is extremely popular, sells like 120,000 examples a year, and is pretty affordable?
RAV4?
No, beyond the RAV4.
Oh, yeah, the 4Runner.
And is the 4Runner going on to the same platform as
Yeah.
the Land Cruiser for 2025 with the same engine?
Yep.
What does a 4Runner start at?
A 4Runner starts at what, 40-something?
40-something. And I think if you need, it starts in rear-wheel drive, but adding four-wheel drive
At
is only...
40,700 is the current Land 4Runner.
And so add four-wheel drive, it's another couple thousand. And let's say for 2025, they're going to add 2,000 or 3,000 to the price because it's a new vehicle. So
even if it's $10,000 cheaper.
You're at 45,000 for a 10 grand difference. And let's also take a look at some other things that the 4Runner has that the Toyota doesn't, namely TRD off-road models and TRD Pro.
Yep.
Why does that matter? Well, the current Land Cruiser has less ground clearance than a Subaru Outback.
Oh my God, really?
And you can't increase that ground clearance. They don't currently offer a model that changes its ground clearance. So you look at that, and then you compare it to the 4Runner TRD Pro, which has all sorts of crazy off-road gear, or even just the TRD, and already it is a more compelling package for off-roaders that is going to cost less feature for feature than the Land Cruiser.
Okay. I'm going to try. I agree with you entirely. I think that this vehicle is already is on the path of dead on arrival. I agree with you. I think the pricing is a huge issue. I think the functionality or the capability seems to be nothing worth sort of with less ground clearance than a Subaru Outback. You're already in trouble. Like that's. If you're comparing a Land Cruiser to the...
Yeah, it should not be in the conversation.
The Land Cruiser is supposed to be kind of, or at least I thought it was,
it's supposed to be
Halo
elite.
Off-road vehicle of the Toyota brand,
It's supposed to be elite.
Yes.
And it's not elite.
Not to say that poor Outbacks aren't elite.
No, but it is merely fine. This is a fine, okay vehicle with a price that suggests it's something more than that.
Okay, let me try a little bit. First of all, I want to talk to you about the last point you made, which was the TRD stuff.
Yes.
I think they're targeting a demographic of TRD people, or off-road outfitters.
Yes,
but the parts haven't come yet.
What they said was this 1958 edition, which is the base model that I drove, was intended to be a blank slate for people who wanted to create their own custom off-road or overlanding rig. That's fine, but you can't price it at $56,000 if that's the case.
Make it priced like a blank slate.
Yeah, you're already telling people, hey, this is a... hey, you're not going to get much gear with this. Like, you're straight up saying that to people, and then you're charging them like it's a Defender. Yeah. And okay, the base Defender doesn't have a ton of gear either, but it is a luxury brand, and it does have better off-road capabilities than this Land Cruiser.
Okay, and then, so I think that they're eventually gonna. I think when the 4Runner is fully unveiled and is available, the new 2025 model, then they're gonna have this huge catalog of TRD parts.
Sure.
And then I think they're probably holding back on that because they share probably a lot, and they don't want to. They don't want to
sell Land Cruisers. They're like, ooh, what a mistake we made. I
don't know.
What you're basically telling me is that there's an $80,000 US Land Cruiser out there waiting in the wings. There's going to be a $90,000 TRD Pro, maybe with the V6 engine. Who knows? It's
but hold on. We've seen these automakers make all these weird off-road oriented versions of the vehicles for a customer that seems comfortable spending more money on a feature or a capability that they may not use. This is what I'm talking about, those soft-roading kind of vehicles, right? Like the Wilderness, or like the Trail Sport, or XRT, or all these other weird ones. All of those
vehicles are another pricing universe away from this.
So they're trying to pull off isn't there a TRD version of the Sequoia, for example?
Yeah.
Which we shouldn't actually, maybe the Sequoia is not a great...
No, not at all. No one should talk about the Sequoia.
I'm sorry. A Z72 version of the Tahoe?
No, those are much larger vehicles.
Okay.
Like way larger.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that there are people who are comfortable spending more money on this capability that isn't totally useful in any way or form.
But Toyota was like, what if we went the same pricing,
way overboard?
What if the same pricing but no extra gear? Are you comfortable paying more for less?
That's exactly it.
I just don't think that's a strategy that's going to work.
Are they memeing the off-road market, the new off-road trend?
It's so strange. It's because
the other part of this that I want to talk about is quote unquote epic reliability worth $15,000 more than a Jeep?
I don't even think epic reliability is something you can apply to Toyota across the board anymore. This is a company that's still doing large recalls like every other automaker.
Actually, one of their recent vehicles, which I think isn't far off. It's a Tundra, right? The Tundra or the Tacoma?
I believe it was the Tundra and the Sequoia, and they had to recall every one that was made this year.
Serious problems
because of internal basically something was left inside the engine during assembly, and it was blocking either oil passages or something else, and they're replacing those motors. So
the epic reliability sort of badge that Toyota used to carry,
it's not something you can necessarily count on. Now, I realize I'm saying a lot of negative things about this vehicle. I would like this vehicle a lot more if it was priced to match its rivals. If it was a $40,000 Wrangler Fighter or Bronco Fighter, I can forgive a lot of these things, because then there's a reasonable pricing ladder you can climb up.
You could forgive everything. You could literally forgive everything.
Yes.
This is the main problem.
But it is entirely the problem with it. I just don't understand. The other issue I have with the pricing is Toyota has been out of this market for so long, in a sense, with the Land Cruiser. Like, they've been neck and neck with the 4Runner. The 4Runner, I think, does not get the same level of attention. The modern version maybe doesn't get the same level of attention as a Wrangler or a Bronco, because, removable top and the whole cult that goes with both of those vehicles. But it is there from a performance perspective. It does do many of the same things that those vehicles do. Land Cruiser's been out of that conversation for a long time. So in a way, Toyota has to conquest these people. Not only that, it's going to have to steal buyers from its own ranks. People who would have bought a 4Runner are probably now going to be looking at the Land Cruiser. So they're in a tough spot. It's like they can't sell a Land Cruiser for the same price as a 4Runner, I guess, in their minds. But if they had made the Land Cruiser the equivalent of a Defender in terms of equipment, they could have justified that price gap.
Yeah.
But then they're stuck with the GX, which is putting pressure.
Which is the real Defender competitor.
Yes, a lot of people have told me that the GX is a far more compelling off-roader than the Land Cruiser. I haven't driven it yet, so I can't say. But Toyota's in this odd spot where they decided to introduce a vehicle that's crammed between a very good and reasonably affordable off-roader and a more expensive with better badge recognition off-roader. And they're splitting the difference, but the equipment levels just don't pair up. Anyway, I've ranted about this.
No. What they've done is they've blown it. They've blown this situation because they had two SUV lines or nameplates that saw different types of success in different times of history. And instead of, I think they wanted to make a soft roader version of the 4Runner. They did, and they leaned to the Land Cruiser for that solution as a nameplate and as an expectation. So I think we're expecting something that's off-road oriented, and what we're instead getting is a soft 4Runner.
It is a soft 4Runner is a good way to put it, but a soft 4Runner with a bargain basement interior and
inexpensive and a more expensive price tag apparently.
I'll say this: like the Wrangler is so unpleasant to drive on the road in Rubicon
yes,
trim.
That's right.
That I left it at home the last time. I had a trip to make, a highway trip to make. It was about an hour and a half of driving. I left it at home and I took my own Jeep Grand Wagoneer, which is from 1987, because it's more comfortable.
Yeah.
And quieter inside, even though it has, twice as many cylinders.
My God.
So I respect the fact that the Land Cruiser drives way better than a Wrangler and way better than a Bronco. That is great. But I can't respect the market position of the vehicle.
Yeah, I think this is a huge whiff on their part. And I don't know how they will recover this. Or is it just that Land Cruiser is a dead name in North America to everyday customers that aren't enthusiasts?
That's a lot of money to spend to launch a dead name. Like this didn't cost them nothing.
It's just for enthusiasts. But even then, it has nothing for enthusiasts. So I don't know what the point is here. Like,
it's like nostalgia. It's like remember when that 70s show was really popular, and they tried to make that 80s show.
And it was a dud.
It was terrible. No one wanted to watch it. This is that.
But then Netflix made a version of it that was that 90s show, I think.
The Land Cruiser is that 80s show of like off-road vehicles. It's just, it follows in the footsteps of something that, was respected and people loved, and it just wasn't able to live up to the hype.
Yeah.
They should have released this with something other than no. You know what I'm thinking? Like, oh, maybe if it wasn't called Land Cruiser, but then the pricing and the pricing and the content would be even more baffling.
Well, they threw the Crown name on it. The Crown.
Oh yeah, the Crown.
Crown Cruiser.
I don't think Crown Cruiser.
That
the
sounds
CC.
ridiculous. Yes.
Wow.
Okay, so that's a huge miss. But I believe you've been driving another vehicle that might not raise our blood pressure that much.
So I went from SUV to SUV, which is essentially our entire career these days.
Yeah, that's all we do, really.
So I drove another all-new vehicle for this year, and it's the 2024 Santa Fe Hybrid from Hyundai. I just want to shout out the Santa Fe. My mom has bought 2 Santa Fe's in a row. My sister had a Santa Fe for a while. It is a very popular SUV, a mid-size SUV, but in recent years, Hyundai has kind of not known, I think, what they want to do with it. For a while, was there always a 3-row Santa Fe in the past, Sammy? Like you get like a small. There was like and then they made the Santa Fe Sport.
I remember it being called the XL, maybe, and then the Santa Fe Sport.
Santa Fe Sport, and then they went back to just normal Santa Fe, and now they've like blown out the Santa Fe to kind of a larger proportion. It's and in doing so, they've dramatically changed the styling. It's gone from being kind of like a curvy, fits in with the rest of the crowd SUV that was, handsome, but nothing special to look at, to a, wow, is this the second coming of the Ford Flex? Like this is a rectilinear, 90-degree angled, large SUV. And then the closer you get to it, you start seeing all these like algorithmic Fibonacci patterns inside of it. Like it's like
really?
Yeah, it's like digital camouflage and little squares and all sorts of stuff everywhere. It is a
inside?
Yeah. Or the exterior of the vehicle as you get closer and closer. It's just more and more rectangles and squares making more and more detail. It's a huge departure for Hyundai, and it's grabbed a lot of eyes. They made a sort of off-road looking version too called the XRT that Sammy kind of mentioned in passing earlier. But I drove the hybrid. There's only one model of hybrid in Canada. There are 3 in the US. There's a SEL, a Limited, and a Calligraphy.
Okay, in Canada, but are they all like regular hybrids or plug-in hybrids?
They're all regular hybrids. There's no plug-in hybrid now. It's been removed from the lineup, so it might be coming in the future, but this is the only hybrid you can get. The version, so I drove the Canadian one is basically a base US one with a few, you could add some stuff with options that kind of makes it like a limited, but kind of doesn't. But mine had like leatherette seats and like a big moonroof and stuff, and not a ton of luxury gear, but I think it's representative of what most people will buy. Mine was about $40,000, and I felt like it was worth the money. I felt like the experience it gave me and the styling really justified that pricing. So I think that I like square vehicles. I think this looks good. It's like a cross between the Flex and the Defender, but way less aggressive than the Land Rover.
It looks a bit bigger and bolder than the Flex does.
Yeah,
I think I'm missing the mark on that.
It's taller.
Reference.
The difference with the Flex is that Flex had a chopped roof.
Yeah, it has feels like a shoulder line, like it's high. Like it feels like you're kind of cruising it.
Yeah. So the Hyundai is a modern interpretation of that. I just think it's one of the most similar looking vehicles in recent years.
What's the powertrain again? It's a 1.6 or
it's a 1.6 turbo. It's basically the same powertrain that it had in the past.
Okay.
They've tweaked the power, so it's 231 horsepower and 271 pound-feet of torque. Last year's model was the same drivetrain, but 226 horsepower. It has a 44.2 kilowatt electric motor. The fuel mileage,
that enough? Is 230 horsepower enough for a 4,500 pound vehicle?
Yes. I was happy with it. I had it loaded with gear. I went on a very long 1,100 mile road trip with the vehicle.
Even fuel efficiency wise?
Well, I will get to that.
Okay.
And I had multiple passengers in it at several points, and it never felt like it was lagging. I always had the power that I needed. I mean, it's not a performance vehicle in any sense of the word, but the fuel mileage was good. I had 29 miles per gallon across 1,100 miles. For a vehicle this big that obviously doesn't care about aerodynamics.
I don't know if that's not better than, let's say, like a Toyota Highlander. Not a Grand Highlander, but a regular Highlander.
I'm not saying it has to be better than a Highlander, but it is a large vehicle with good fuel mileage. The official rating is 35, 34.
Okay.
The combined is 34, so I didn't meet the combined, but real world is different. There's hills and stuff.
Okay. In that case, then the Highlander it's very close to the Highlander, which I think is 36, 35.
And you were asking about you asked about fuel mileage. Interior space is great. I was driving around with a 6-footer sitting behind me, and I didn't have to adjust my seat at all. There's plenty of room. The rear row, it was a little bit of a mix between like manual adjustment and automated stuff. So like if you needed to get to the third row, you could push a button and it would flip forward and move all the way out of your way. You could get to the third row. But if you wanted to adjust it yourself, you're like reaching underneath to grab the bar and kind of move it around and whatnot. But it's pretty configurable. The third row is like very small. It's mostly for kids. My head was like very close to the ceiling, probably because I had the moonroof installed.
Oh yeah.
But cargo space is good behind the second row. It's bad behind the third row. Like it says it's like 14 cubic feet, but it's like vertical cubic feet. So
useless.
You'd have to have specific luggage to take advantage of that. It's not a great situation. But if you're only carrying 4 people, it's good. And I think it's like 80 cubic feet total behind the front row, which is about average for this type of vehicle.
What do you think of this interior design?
I like the fact that, so remember I was complaining about
it's got so much going on. It's got so many different, like, it's got squares, it's got circles, it's got like...
I complained about the Land Cruiser just being this massive black plastic, and going into the Santa Fe really threw that into stark relief because, as you mentioned, there's a lot of detail, there's different materials, the plastics feel pretty soft, there's some bright work on the door cards, the dashboard has like the way the vents are is pretty cool. The only thing I don't really like about the interior is the shifter, which Hyundai has gone to this thing where they have like it's a shifter on the steering column and you have to twist it forward and backwards. Yeah. And it's often blocked by the steering wheel. In the Santa Fe, it's not as bad because it's bigger, but like I had this in the Sonata and in the Ioniq 5, and it just feels like a hassle. Yeah. But, moving on to other parts of the vehicle, because it's larger, there's a cool storage bin in between the front seats. The console on top has like wireless charging and room for a second phone beside it, which is pretty rare.
Yeah, I see that. I think this is a very interesting design philosophy they've made. I've always complained that when you move the shifter away from the center console there, um, you need to do something with that extra space, right? Like
Sure.
that's give us a reason why you did that. Don't just wow, it's a button now. And having more storage space is one thing, but maybe two like that double phone tray seems to be a more effective use of that entirely. I think that's really smart.
And I also something that was neat is the something else that was neat is the center console itself. You can open it from the front or the rear. So the rear
Oh,
pass
cool.
it has like a double hinge. So if you're sitting in the second row, you can actually access the console in a non-awkward way, which is just a little touch that I thought was fun.
Let me find a photo of this double hinged. I can't. Anyways,
Yeah, I don't.
infotainment system, all that is still typical Hyundai stuff.
Pretty standard Hyundai.
Any complaints? Anything bogging down? Sometimes we find like these systems can sometimes like feel old after a while.
So the issue I had with driving the vehicle, it wasn't really an infotainment system issue, but it was an active safety issue. So actually, there's two things. Let me back that up. The version of the vehicle I had, it doesn't have voice controls. So you can use your voice to talk to Google's Android Auto or Apple CarPlay.
Yep.
But if you wanted to control vehicle functions, you have to upgrade to a model that has dynamic navigation or dynamic voice control, which comes with the navigation system. So you have to have at minimum the limited trim, which is 43,000. In Canada, there's no way to get it. Like I had the pricing in Canada also 43,000 Canadian, which I think is an interesting similarity.
Yeah.
It's actually cheaper here. But even with the options package I was on the phone with Hyundai. We got a BlueLink account installed because I wanted to get voice commands, but you need BlueLink in order to use their dynamic feature, but you also have to have the dynamic feature, and my vehicle did not have it. So that's a little disappointing. Something else I didn't like so much was it has an attention monitor or a driver fatigue monitor, one of those systems, and it was really overactive. And it was constantly dinging me on certain.
It looks like one of those front-facing camera doodads, like those infrared.
It was
cameras.
annoying. I didn't appreciate it, and I also the adaptive cruise control for the base model, like I had, does not have the full like semi-self-driving thing. It has like lane centering, and
It doesn't have the highway driving assist.
no,
feature.
it doesn't. But it works to a degree. I just found that the lane centering, like if I was eating a sandwich and had something in one hand and one hand on the wheel, then I appreciated it. But if I was fully concentrated on steering, it was intrusive. And I ended up turning it off.
I find that Hyundai's driver, it's called Highway Driving Assist or HDA, and I think they have a new version called HDA 2, is one of the better. What?
Just like HDA too. It's just funny. What are we going to call it?
It's one of the better systems on the market, and
Yeah,
it
I
can
agree.
do a lot.
I
And then
agree.
it can also do some bizarre things. I don't know if this is just like it's speed dependent, maybe on how long it takes before it tells you to put your hands back on the wheel, maybe because it feels it can go a long time.
Yeah, we've talked about that in the past. I actually was in a traffic jam about a month ago in the Sonata, and I had a stopwatch out, and I was timing how long I could keep my hands off the wheel at low speeds, and it was like well over 5 minutes.
That's crazy,
And
right?
yeah, it's and there's no indication, right? It doesn't tell you. And then on the highway, it was like 2 minutes.
yeah,
And it's weird
that's
because
still a long time.
it is a
actually.
long time, and it's strange though because you don't want to have
Inconsistencies.
yeah, you don't want to have inconsistent reinforcement for a safety system.
Yeah, you want it to be consistent all the time.
You want to know. You want to know what the limits are. So that's a little weird.
That's so funny.
I don't want to talk
because, like, then on the highway, you'd be like, "Oh, it didn't intervene for 5 minutes. I can X, Y, and Z with my hands off the wheel," which you shouldn't, but
No.
some people might.
I wanted to point out there's not a lot of competitors for the Santa Fe Hybrid, right? Like there's the Toyota Highlander Hybrid.
Yeah.
Actually, it's just a Toyota Highlander. I don't think it's called the Hybrid anymore, right? No,
Okay.
there is a hybrid because there is a base model that's not hybrid. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And then there's the Kia Sorento Hybrid,
Which is the same, almost the same thing.
but very very different package. It looks quite
Okay.
different,
Yeah, it looks different.
and it's a little bit older, I think, the platform. And
The main issue here is the main thing that is difficult to find the competition for is that it's a hybrid, right?
yes, it's a hybrid 3-row. So those are pretty much the only two. You can get the CX-90 hybrid, but that's a plug-in, and it's
Didn't the Ford Explorer have a hybrid?
oof. I don't know. That's a good question. I know that the CX-90 hybrid plug-in is like $10,000 more expensive.
Oh yeah, there's that. Yeah, okay, that's a good point, but it's expensive.
Yeah, and it's a different class of vehicle, right? And it's honestly, if I had to choose, I'm choosing the Hyundai. I did not have great experiences, but I'm going to look and see if there's no Explorer hybrid at this time.
There isn't a plug-in and there isn't a normal hybrid. That's so funny.
The only hybrids you can get in SUV from Ford right now is the Escape.
Oh my God. Can I tell you the latest generation Explorer I have yet to drive? Like, really? I've never had a chance to test it yet.
I've only driven because I feel ST, like I think.
Of this 2020, maybe it's a 4 or 23, I think was the update.
Yeah, I drove the ST.
Interesting. Anyways, I feel like completely out of the loop with this vehicle because on paper, which is, you know, I've seen it in terms of its spec sheet and its pricing, it seems like a pretty competitive vehicle, but I've never had the actual experience to recommend it or not recommend it. Okay, other 3 rows with a hybrid, it can't be that low, right? That limited.
I really can't think. There's nothing else. I did a search and
Jeep something or other. Jeep. No, that's a plug-in.
Do they make a hybrid version of the Grand Wagoneer, the Grand Cherokee L? I don't think they do.
It's just a 48 volt thing, eh?
Yeah, I think that to get the plug-in in the or to get the hybrid in the Grand Cherokee, it's just the standard Grand Cherokee.
Okay.
I let me double check that though, because I'm not entirely sure. But
even then, the pricing would, I think,
the pricing gets, because the Grand Cherokee L, the 3-row starts at $40,000.
Yeah,
and that's, you know, near the top price. Okay, there is a 4x4E version of it, so that is out there.
But that's a plug-in.
And it's $60,000.
That's a plug-in, not a standard hybrid.
And it's way above the price that you would pay here. So yeah, and there's also the Volvo XC90, and now you're starting to get like paying real money for this. But it's an interesting option. Most people. Do you
think Honda will not make the new Pathfinder a hybrid? I mean, the CR-V took its time to get a hybrid version, and now it came out the gates with the latest generation.
You mean Pilot, not Pathfinder.
Pilot. Sorry.
I don't know if they'll do that. I mean, but Pathfinder is another interesting thing to bring up.
Nissan hasn't done anything in a while, and I don't expect them to.
All right.
They're trying to figure out Aria right now, I think, their EV. And are killing every other vehicle in their lineup to make that work out. I mean,
you and I have said in the past, most people do not need a 3-row SUV. They're not going to use it. And if they do want something like that, they should get a minivan.
No, the 3-row SUV is an occasional 3rd-row use. Yeah. It is always for that function.
So the fact that the Hyundai, the fact that there's only really 3 competitors in this segment is not all that surprising.
But they're good. Like each one of them has their. I mean, with the exception of the CX-90, each one of them has their place, right?
Sure.
Like they've earned their place in the segment. They offer really good fuel efficiency, great capability, practicality, and they're well priced.
And I think the Hyundai is the most fashion forward of them all.
The Highlander has gotten really.
The Highlander does not look. The Highlander looks average. It's fine. The Sorento is okay. It's not something that stands out. But the Hyundai has made sure that the Santa Fe does stand out. So if that's important to you, if you want something that's not anonymous looking, then I'm glad this is here. And I think we're kind of seeing this across the board with Hyundai, where they're making more and more styling decisions. Like even the Sonata, it doesn't look like a Camry. You know, the Camry's not boring, but the Sonata
looks kind of neat though, doesn't it?
Yeah, it looks kind of neat, but like the Sonata is something else. It's something different. And, if you're going to be one of the few people still selling a mid-sized sedan, then you got to give people a reason to buy it.
That's fair. I think that's a really good point. And I think that's important to point out, because I think sometimes, if you've been following the market for a long time, you'll realize that a lot of these cars do have a lot in common in terms of features and performance and fuel efficiency. They might be off by like a single degree here and there. So the main thing that ends up differentiating the vehicles externally is that design, in addition to other things that might be out of the automaker's control, like a dealership network or something like that, or dealership experience.
So there's one more thing I wanted to talk about before we wrapped up our welcome back to the
What's that?
Podcast. We had a question from Raiko who wrote to us and asked, They were listening to our episode about car mods and track work and stuff. And they mentioned that they've done a few days with their Audi S3 on the track, which were a lot of fun. And they were curious as to maybe what kind of upgrades they should pursue so they could get more out of the track day. Now, they brought up whether they should add a rear sway bar, or if they should add power, or if they should just stick to better pads and rotors on the brakes and decent rubber and seat time. I've never done the driver instructor on the track in my car. From your experience, is this worth it? Sammy, what do you say?
Step one always is driver instructor
100%.
training.
100%. The driver mod is the best mod you could ever make.
I think step two are tires, and not like track tires, but like those tires that can go both ways.
Yeah, but I think even before tires, I think more track. If you have
wear out the tires on your car with the instructor, and then
there's a specific reason for that, because you'll learn a lot more on street tires than you will on performance tires. Street tires, they break traction much more quickly, or more earlier, I should say, than a performance tire, which means that when you make a mistake, you're able to tell that you've made a mistake sooner than with a high performance tire. And this even gets to extremes. Once you get to extremely sticky tires, once they've broken free, you're screwed. So it's really a spectrum of learning, where with a street tire, you're getting immediate feedback. With a very high performance track tire, the feedback is far more subtle. And for an ultra high performance tire, there's almost no feedback before things go wrong. So my advice is the single best thing, if you have a limited amount of money to spend on track stuff, which we all do, spend it on being behind the wheel as often as you can, and having an instructor sitting beside you, someone who's a better driver than you are, is always going to have insight into things that you're doing that could be improved. Every time I drive with someone who's a better driver, I always walk away with, at the very least, their perspective, which is different than mine, on how the lap could have gone. And that's worth its weight in gold.
That's huge. Yeah, absolutely. The other thing to point out is that Raiko mentioned that the car is their daily driver.
And still has the child seat in the back of the track, which is amazing.
When you start doing it still has the car seat in the back. To me, when you start doing some modifications in search of faster lap times, you might end up compromising the daily ability of the vehicle in a number of other ways. It might be reliability, it might be comfort, it might be fuel efficiency, it might be practicality. All of these things might really impact the usability of the car. Yeah. So I would really recommend first getting as many lap days as you can, getting the instructor with you. And then once you're getting confident with that, seeing where you can go with some better traction and maybe even stopping power, I think is great too.
My first track car was a Miata, a stock 95 Miata. And it was an exceptional learning tool because I used a modest sport tire on it. And the power in a Miata is so low that if you make a mistake, it really stands out. It affects your lap time. You can't just... Your
whole lap, yeah.
Yeah, you can't just paper over the mistake with horsepower on a straight. So I really find like the more basic you can keep your car in stock configuration, the more you're going to learn before it's time to...
That lesson translates as you add power and grip. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I've never owned... This is going to sound strange. I've never owned a track car where I felt the need to add power.
Yeah.
Like I have no plans to add power to my Datsun whatsoever. So it's all about just becoming a better driver. And I think that the track time and the instruction is the way to do that. Sammy, if other people had questions that they wanted to ask us, or if they wanted to ask you more questions about your vacation, because you've been very quiet about how it went and whether you had fun and the things that you did, how could people reach out to us?
The easiest way to do that is to head on over to our website, unnamedautomotivepodcast.com. And there's a contact form there. You fill that out, and it lands in our inbox. And me and Ben usually discuss it and talk about it on the podcast the next chance we get. The other way you can reach out to us is via email, the old-fashioned way. It's benjamin@benjaminhunting.com. Or you can reach out to us on social media. Ben is on the filter-filled world of Instagram. He's at Hunting Benjamin. You can find me on the social media network formerly known as Twitter. I'm at Sammy_ha.
Sammy, I thought you had left Twitter.
I haven't really done anything on Twitter for a long time.
Are you on Instagram too? Do you want to talk about
Instagram? I am on Instagram. I'm on all these other things like Threads, I suppose.
No, don't talk about Threads. Well, what about Instagram?
at Sammy_ha, like you're laughing.
There you go. That's so much. I automatically feel better now. I don't know.
Okay, good.
Just like eliminating Twitter from our show is just, chef's kiss.
I really encourage people to head on over to our website where you can see all of our previous episodes and photos of the cars that we've been talking about. And you can also subscribe to our podcast on the website by clicking on some of the buttons at the top of the page.
Sammy, what are we going to be talking about next week? What are you going to be talking about next week?
Next week, I'm back into an electric vehicle. I've got the 2024 Honda Prologue.
Oh.
Which is an interesting vehicle. I'm very eager to test it because it's Honda's first mainstream electric vehicle in North America, which is important to bring up because I will talk about my vacation a little bit more here because in the Middle East, they have a bunch of these Chinese joint venture cars, and there's a Honda joint venture vehicle called the ENP1 or something like that. It's an awful name, but I saw them everywhere. And here we are. We're getting, instead of a joint venture Honda Chinese company, we're getting a joint venture Honda GM.
Now, so you bring up GM. I was supposed to be driving the twin of that vehicle this week, the Chevrolet Blazer EV, which is, I think, the electrical system is borrowed for, and much of the platform is borrowed for the Prologue, but it is in the shop. And that was unfortunately a dream deferred. I will be talking about instead next week the Cadillac XT4, which is a crossover that I have not driven since 2019, according to my records.
Wow. I don't think it's been updated really significantly since then.
Well, we'll see.
Okay. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.